What does it mean to be a modern-day witch doctor? One who bridges the worlds of healing, spirits, and storytelling. Can psychic abilities be trained and structured like any other discipline? Welcome to the Magical Professions Podcast, a creative exploration of magic and magical professions, waiting to be discovered beyond the conventional jobs we know. What can myths, legends, and personal stories reveal about careers beyond the mainstream? How do sci-fi, fantasy, and folklore shape our understanding of magic in society and everyday life? Let's go together on this mystical journey into the unknown. Today, we're honored to speak with Aly Cardinalli, a witch doctor, performing arts specialist, psychic, and master educator, whose work spans many years of experience in spiritual, cultural, and artistic disciplines. Born into a family of witchcraft professionals, Aly's psychic and mediumship abilities manifested early, allowing him to navigate both the human and spirit worlds with precision and care. Welcome, Aly. It's a great pleasure and honor to have you on our podcast. Can you please briefly introduce yourself and let our listeners know where you are joining us from what part of the world? Thank you.
Sure. Oh, thank you so much for having me. Sure. I am in Texas in the United States, and I am so excited to talk to you. My profession is pretty uncommon, and to just help your listeners understand what a witch doctor actually is and all the aspects that we bring to the table when it comes to healing or for hire.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. We will go into depths into this question. First of all, I wanted to ask about Texas, because I like to give our listeners a feel of a place where the person is talking from. I think because it also has its own influence on the subject. Can you tell a little bit about Texas? Maybe there is some mystical aspect to it that maybe we're not aware of, but you can give us a sense of it.
Sure. I am in the Austin, Texas area, and because Texas is so giant and I'm not a native Texan, I can't speak for Texas, but I can talk a little bit about Austin and what I found here. In the Austin, Texas area, it's known for its slogan is Keep Austin Weird. And what I love about that is that it's very community oriented when it comes to the craft. There's a very connected community here in Austin. Most of it is pretty modern witchcraft and spiritism, not much in ancient lore, but it's still very friendly and welcoming. I'm originally from Hawaii, which is a little bit different when it comes to culture than mainland US, but here in Austin, what I have found to be home is the multicultural acceptance.
Thank you for this introduction. And now we want to hear about you. So what is a witch doctor and how you came to become a witch doctor?
Sure. Let's start with, I guess, how I became a witch doctor. It's such a great word. When people think the word witch doctor, they generally think about people with bones in their nose and people from different parts of Africa. It was a term that was derogatory for people who were faith healers in aspects of mysticism from indigenous cultures. I've decided to take back the term and call it my profession because I do have all of the skills that were required of indigenous shamanic faith healers, mystics, and priests. And so there are 9 areas that a witch doctor needs to be an expert in order to call themselves a witch doctor. The first of which is to be a shape shifter, or to shift someone's perspective. And it's usually through storytelling or some kind of performing, whether it's music, folklore, or dance. Then we also need to be a psychic medium, an exorcist, which is one of my strongest expertise, a healer. We do need to be a witch for hire, but usually the term witch in indigenous cultures is not used. It's a modern term, but you would use the term manifester, or be able to create based on the energies around that are accessible. We also need to be a teacher or a mentor. We do need to be a counselor or mediator. And we do need to be a priest to talk on behalf of spirits or deities based on one's own culture. And then the 9th one is being able to spirit walk or shamanically journey, be able to leave your body and transition from world to world or existence to existence.
So there are quite a few things that you needed to learn in order to
Yes.
call yourself a witch doctor. How did you acquire all those different expertises through time? How did it all start, first of all? Yes, where the legs are growing from. So where did this happen?
So to start as a psychic medium, I was born that way. I do have a sister who's also a psychic medium, so we carry the genes in our family. The kind of medium I am is called a dark medium, and it's the kind of medium that interacts with things that people are afraid of, that maybe go bump in the night, and maybe when you're walking through the forest and you have this horrible feeling that something's watching you. I see those things. So that's the kind of medium I am, which is why I'm an exorcist. I was born that way, and when it came to the craft and learning the craft, my grandmother on my father's side, she was a witch doctor, and so I started learning from her when I was 8, when I would go to visit my father. My parents were divorced, and when I would visit my father, sometimes she watched us, and while my siblings were playing, she would pull me into the kitchen, and we would start learning. She knew from early on that I had the sight and the gift that she also had. My father knew early on that I was psychic and would utilize that in fun ways throughout my childhood. And then when it came to me becoming a healer, as I mentioned, I was raised in Hawaii. So a lot of the healing modalities that I do and teach are from Hawaiian ancestry. Even though I'm not Hawaiian myself, it's where I am culturally from. Spirit walking is part of being a mystic, and I also started walking out of my body, or some people would use the terms astral projection or shamanic journeying, around the age of 13, and started using that as how I help people heal as well. As a counselor and a mediator, I did start my training as a mental health counselor and found that that wasn't the appropriate route for me. So I went into spiritual counseling instead. As a storyteller, as you mentioned, I am a performing arts expert. I am an expert in 17 styles of dance, 18 styles of dance, 7 styles of voice, and I'm an award-winning director, having directed and choreographed 136 productions. You can say that I don't have hobbies. This has been my life in order to be able to have this many expertise, while some people through their 20s, 30s are enjoying movies or hanging out with friends. I studied and learned and learned and learned. Now I'm in a part of my life where I can give back all that I've learned and be able to teach and mentor.
Thank you so much, Aly, for this introduction. It's very impressive. sometimes abilities make us feel different. Being a kid with these abilities, how did you feel the connection with other people around? How was your communication? How was your interaction with your peers?
Growing up as a medium, I was more a medium than I was a psychic as a child. And it was explained away as a vivid imagination. So it wasn't terribly difficult that the spirits I interacted with, I thought were imaginary friends or just a vivid imagination and a way to escape. It wasn't until I was in my early 20s that my sister explained to me that it wasn't my imagination and had walked me through my interactions with spirits. When I was in my early 20s, I went through an unfortunate near-death experience where I was the victim of an attempted homicide. When that happened, it finished breaking whatever filter most of us have between the spirit world and our world. And it made me, unfortunately, oversensitive when it came to psychic activity and mediumship. I have funny stories. Most of the odd interactions, like you mentioned, when we are sensitive, when we have these abilities, they can be at times debilitating, but I like to think that a lot of them were humorous. I have a daughter who has been wonderful, and we have hilarious stories of what it's like for her to grow up having a psychic father. And in some cases, she has also been an advocate and has helped me through situations where my nervous system starts to shut down because there's too much energy. There's too many things that I'm naturally reading without control. There's an idea in Hollywood and in a toxic positivity space when it comes to spirituality that being a medium is spiritual and not biological. Just like someone who has sensitive eyes, they go out in and it's a sunny day and they need sunglasses. When someone is an oversensitive psychic, it's their biology and their nervous system can shut down because there's too much input. And there aren't sunglasses for being psychic. You do have to develop some coping strategies, but you can't squint it away and you can't just stop it or overly control it. You can manage it, but you can't really control it.
You just mentioned Hollywood movies, and this is how most of the people perceive people with the psychic abilities, with the mediumship. What are the main misconceptions that people have about those with these unique abilities?
Sure, I'd love to answer that question. The biggest misconception is that we are machines. So, because we are biological, if you take an Olympic runner and they hit their best time, and then you make them stay up all night, or you put them out in a thunderstorm, or you give them news that a close relative has passed away. In any of those cases, they're not going to run their best time like they did when they had the perfect environment. Psychics are the same. We are biological, and although we have repeatable outcomes, we're definitely affected by our physical health. We're affected by natural environments. We're affected by mental health. We're affected just like everything else. If there's something distracting in the room, it might be hard to connect. So that's the first misconception, is we are biological. Because of that, there's a variance in how much psychic processing we access. And I'm very careful to say accurate because real psychics are accurate. they are always accurate. It's how they explain the information or if they are making assumptions that are the inaccuracies. The other misconception is that all sensitives, all mediums, are what I call oversensitives, where the perception of what they receive psychically and what they receive, let's say visually, are blended in their mind, and that they mistake a dead person for a living person. Most mediums are not oversensitive, where they will see in their mind's eye, like it's similar to imagination. A clairvoyant death medium will see in their mind's eye someone's face. It's very rare that the synapses in the brain are crossed, very similar to synesthesia, where a medium their brain mixes the signal, and like in TV shows, they see with their naked eyes someone dead and nobody else sees them. Well, it's not possible to see them with their naked eyes because there's no light refracting off of something. So there is nothing there to see with their eyes. Otherwise, other people would also see them. The reason why those mediums think they're seeing with their naked eye is because their brain is mixing the signal with psychic information and actual ocular information. That was a lot. But those are the two misconceptions.
Thank you, Ali. And we're talking about seeing things, like you said, that people without the abilities cannot see. So seeing more than there is that correct?
Yes, there are 6 different psychic senses. One of the most common ones that we're familiar with in media is clairvoyance, being able to see. But there are 5 other senses that a psychic could have that are not necessarily seeing. And that's another misconception, is that all psychics see, and they don't. There are 6 different senses that a psychic can have.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on those?
Sure. A clairvoyant, everybody thinks clairvoyant means psychic, but it actually means someone who has visions. They see clearly, usually in their mind's eye. A clairaudient hears in their mind voices, sometimes their own voice or the voice of other people. They may also have different sounds or music that pop in their head, and that's clairaudient. Claircognizant is someone who knows. They just know something intrinsically. And this is without going through the normal ways that we learn something. They just know. And then the next one is clairsentient, which is clear feeling. This can manifest in 2 different ways. One is actual physical manifestations, where the nervous system will teach the body or torque the body to have physical sensations that mimic someone else's physical sensations, or emotional, where they feel what someone else is feeling. And this is not to be confused with an empath. An empath is reacting to something. A clairsentient is mirroring, and you can put them in different rooms and it just happens. They don't need to be aware that what is going on, whereas an empath is aware. The last 2 are probably the rarest of psychic senses. Clairgustance, and that's the ability to taste or have tastes. And then clairalience, and that's the ability to know how something smells or to smell something. So those are the 6. There's also telekinesis, and although it's not technically a sense, it's good to kind of plug it into this group. And that's the ability to move something with your energy. And even if we don't use psychic, we can look at Taoism, including Tai Chi and Qigong, on how people can use energy to move a physical object. Well, in that discipline, they train it, but as psychics, you just have it.
Thank you so much, Ali. How many psychic people are around us? How often do we encounter a psychic and maybe we just even don't know about that? So how many people have these abilities?
Oh gosh, I don't know, but I have thoughts. So during the Spanish Inquisition, people who were sensitive were hunted and killed. And the gene was pretty eradicated. And so we don't have as many psychics and mediums as we would have pre-Christian era. If we think back to Neolithic or shamanic traditions, most people connected to spirit. It wasn't a unique gift. It was what most people did. Because of the hunting of people who maybe were advantaged with extra senses, the gene pool was diluted greatly. Nowadays, I am noticing that there are more people who are psychic but don't know they are psychic. They go without someone ever explaining to them that they are. Like, they just know the elevator is going to break. And they go, I have a feeling. I'm not going to do it. And then it does break. And they're like, I just have an intuition. Baby, you're psychic. That is psychic. Or they're physically sick around someone and their body is telling them this is bad. That's clairsentient. That is a psychic phenomena. Or they have dreams of something that is going to happen, or they have a premonition, or they even have deja vu. Those are also psychic happenings. I think there are more people who are psychic, but because of certain judgments, people are afraid to accept these parts of themselves, and they would rather use a term that is more mainstream, like empath. And they're not empaths, they're actually psychics.
And you already even mentioned this in a way, but I would like to go maybe a little bit more into that, how to recognize those psychic abilities in yourself. Like you already mentioned, sometimes you just may feel that, yeah, it doesn't really feel good, whatever it is, I will avoid it. So probably noticing those things and trying just to become more aware of that. But maybe you have some more insights because, like you said, there are people and they have this in them and they even don't know that they have it. So how to start recognizing those abilities in yourself?
I think the hardest thing is because of the preconceived thoughts of what a psychic is, because of the media, people wouldn't think to ask themselves certain questions. Like, someone might be clairvoyant if they do have a lot of moments of deja vu. Where did that come from? Where they knew something was going to happen? Now that's precognitive. But another one is if I tell someone a story and I stop partway through the story and I say, can you tell me what this person was wearing? If they're able to follow the story in their head, and then you ask them a question about something you didn't mention, like, what time of day is it? Or what's the weather like? You ask them something that they can observe from what they're watching in their head, and they're accurate, they're probably clairvoyant.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They're just not used to being asked those kinds of questions.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can do that with all of the senses. So where I teach at Bear Bridge Academy, it's an online learning school where we teach live for psychics and witches around the world. And I'm head of the psychic and shamanic department. And when I am training or helping psychics understand about themselves, there's a huge process of vetting and asking questions. So they sign up, they come to class because they suppose, and then we figure it out based on different questions and tests. Of course, they're nervous, but what makes it special is that I am an oversensitive clairsentient, which means that my body will reproduce what the psychic is going through. So as they're testing, I can watch what is in their mind. I can listen in my mind. I can feel in my body. And even if they miss it, I don't miss it. So I can write down, oh, they could actually do this. They just don't know they can do this. Or, no, they're deducing. That's not actually claircognitive. That's standard deduction. So that's what makes the school special in how to determine. My students call me a human sensor because my body, its own little sensing machine, which makes students laugh at times. And it helps us move along in class. It's super helpful to have a psychic teacher that can pause and say, oh, I understand you don't understand what's going on. Let me try to rephrase this. And just immediately rephrase instead of wait for someone to say, I'm confused.
Yes, and I see the way you are talking about teaching about students, it looks like you are really enjoying it. What brought you to teaching? One thing is to be a psychic and a medium, another thing is to teach. So why did you decide to start doing it? And why are you enjoying doing it?
I've always been a teacher first. I do have a private practice where I do have clients that hire me for aspects, but the primary part of my life is as a teacher. I've always been a teacher. In fact, this coming June, I will be celebrating 25 years as a teacher. I have several certifications through both Department of Defense and Department of Education as an instructor. And I've been dean of a performing arts school. I'm the headmaster at this school. I've been the education specialist at a healing wellness center. I've always loved teaching. And I find that, at least in the mystical fields, there aren't enough of us who really care about teaching. There are professionals who also teach, but not us teachers who are also professionals. So there's just very few of us who really love the teaching aspect of it. I mean, we keep practicing because we need to stay current, but there's very few of us who are really passionate about teaching and watching students grow and blossom and turn into their best version of themselves. That's always been my passion as a teacher, is not to teach them what I know, but to facilitate a learning environment that they can be better than what I know.
I also love teaching. It resonated with me. Thank you. And you also mentioned one of the reasons why people do not look at themselves as psychics, because we still have that connotation, maybe somewhat negative, about being a psychic. So maybe you can tell what psychics are not, because people think about this negative way. And I think many of those things are also misconceptions. And the less we have of those misconceptions, the more open I think people will be to discover those abilities in themselves.
What are psychics not?
Mm-hmm.
That is a really hard question. I would say there might be an assumption that all psychics see the dead, and they don't. Not all psychics are mediums. There may be an assumption that they are cursed. Well, they're not cursed, it's biological. It is a sense, just like someone who is, I'm going to use some more eye things. Someone who can see lots of different colors is a tetrachromat. They are special in how they can perceive the world by seeing all these different variants in color. A psychic just also experiences the world around them in other variants, like a tetrachromat, or someone who might suffer from misophonia, where they're so sensitive to different kinds of sounds. A psychic is not religion. And I want to be really clear that although there are aspects of my job that are spiritual and take and a leap of faith or belief or a connection to spirituality of some kind. The actual psychic, and I don't mean medium, the actual psychic aspect is not spiritual, it is biological. And there is a group of people who would look at a psychic and say, devil worshiper. And that's as silly as calling someone with brown hair a devil worshiper. One has absolutely nothing to do with the other. There's nothing to do with faith. And psychics can be a part of any faith. They are part of every culture, every part of the world. Just like we all have eyes and we all have ears and we all have mouths, we can all find in every culture someone who is a sensitive, who has extra senses. I think that's one part is I thought that maybe there was something wrong with me. Also, psychics may be afraid, or people listening may think that psychics is actually a manifestation of a mental illness. Well, now in the American Psychological Association, you cannot diagnose someone who hears voices as schizophrenic without other variants, other aspects. Someone who hears voices is not a determining factor for any mental illness. Same thing with seeing dead people. That, let's quote, hallucination is not diagnosable for any mental illness alone. There have to be other aspects in order to diagnose mental illness. So that means any of your listeners who are psychic and they want to talk to their therapist about the spirits that they see, their doctor is not allowed to call them or decide they are crazy, because that alone is not a determining factor for mental illness. And I want to empower people and correct people when they find out a psychic sees, let's say, demons. It doesn't mean that they are mentally ill. It means that they're a medium.
Thank you so much for clarifying that. I think that's very important. And my next question is, you see so many students. Yes, you've been teaching for so many years. What are the biggest challenges for the students when they're working on developing their psychic abilities?
Sure. The hardest day is the day when they find out what their abilities are, what they can and cannot do. And we test for repeatable outcomes. So, someone who has a vivid imagination may think that they are clairvoyant. And the hardest part is to tell them they aren't. Oh, God, I hate that day. I hate it so much. It's the worst to say, I'm sorry, you're not clairvoyant. That is actually just your imagination and deductive reasoning. But those students generally do have other skills. And so letting them know you are claircognitive or you are clairalient. And this is how we develop those skills, but we can't trust what you believe is a vision because they aren't actually accurate. And that means you're not actually clairvoyant. And so that's probably the worst part of my job as a teacher, is the let down when they have a idea or they believe that they're one thing, but they actually aren't. That's tough. The students all receive it really well because as their training goes on, they can see repeatable outcomes. So then they're excited about, oh, this is who I am. That first letdown is unfortunate, but they get stronger and better at understanding what their sensitivities are and how to repeat the outcomes. And then they're loving their biology. They love who they actually are instead of the preconceived thoughts of what they thought they were. Other parts are in at least the witchcraft area. What is difficult is when students don't have talent in some areas. But again, my job as a teacher is to help them find talent in another. So they may not get spells to work in a certain way. And so my job is to help them find another discipline or another direction. And then I would say in our mysticism department, the hardest part of teaching is when students have encountered religious trauma and they come to our school looking for new faith. My school isn't one religion. We teach lots of different religions at the school. We're not a church. We don't indoctrinate. We just educate. But what is difficult as a teacher is when students are coming from trauma and they are searching for new faith. I love faith. I love religions. I love everything about spirituality and being able to connect to something more than ourselves and to connect to community and to connect to ourselves, which is what religion is supposed to do. When people are traumatized by what people in their communities or cultures have weaponized with religion and they're searching for something new, they have to overcome that pain first before they can find what faith does work for them. And that's hard. It's hard to watch people who are suffering.
Thank you, Ali. You also mentioned several times today that psychic abilities are biological. Does this mean that people cannot develop them if they don't have that biological background, biological predetermination?
They can develop what they already have. So they can strengthen or understand or focus, but can they create something that they don't have? Listen, I'm 5'5". I will never be a tall person. And that's just accepting my body the way it is. It's the same thing with people who are psychics. You either have it or you don't. You may not be aware that you have something, which is exciting to unveil, but can you create something that you do not have? The unfortunate answer is no. You can't develop a skill you don't have.
The next question is, while looking at what your programs have to offer, I was very surprised to see so many unique things that I haven't seen anywhere else. Among them, a different type of magic and Italian, Etruscan, including I saw
Yes.
also, I think, Russian
Yes.
black type of magic. So where did you gather all this unique knowledge to bring to the table and teach people?
Great question. I don't teach all of the classes.
Mm-hmm.
So there's first that is I don't have all of this knowledge. Boy, I wish I did. And as you can see in my house, I am an avid reader and researcher.
Yeah.
So I do teach the Italian witchcraft. And in that course, we go through Etruscan, we go through Adadia, which there's a lot of debate. Is it actually Italian? But we also go through that. We go through Benedicaria as well, which is not well known. It's super, super small. And we practice those ways based on the different manuscripts and interviews that witches from different parts of Italy told, that they shared. There are lots of different aspects in Italian witchcraft.
Mm-hmm.
So we go through a bunch of different folk traditions, and it's a super fun 6-week course where they figure out what they're good at and again, what they're not. I also teach Druid. My mother was from Germany, and so I teach Druid mysticism. And I also teach Hawaiian, as I mentioned. I teach Hawaiian healing because I'm from Hawaii. We do offer other forms of witchcraft which are taught by different instructors. We do teach Russian black magic. It's a really exciting course where They use Natasha Helvin's book as a textbook, and it's taught by the head of our witchcraft department. We also have baneful practices. We don't believe at Bear Bridge Academy to edit, censor, or burn books. We believe in teaching. So if a student wants to learn something that is considered evil or dark, we do offer the classes on how to do it. And with that, we also teach the safety. We don't teach ethics. We just teach the information. Again, if we start to lean into ethics, whose ethics are we going to use? And that then makes us a religious entity instead of a school. So we stay away from that. We just teach the information. Mm-hmm. We also have an amazing green witchery teacher. She is phenomenal in herbology and botany. I mean, she's just encyclopedia of information. We also have an incredible crystal healing instructor. So anything on crystals and the like is her area. And we also have an astrology teacher. I don't teach all of these areas. In fact, I would say when it comes to crystals, I'm pretty novice. I don't know very much. I know enough to be more than the average person, being that I do own a witchcraft school, but I am certainly not an expert in crystals. My expertise are usually in spirits and interacting with spirits. They're in shamanic or ancient practices. All of the modern ways that people like to explore in witchcraft, I'm not super familiar with. I'm more familiar with old things. And again, the students kind of know that if it's old, Aly knows it. If it's new, don't ask Aly. He may not know. Although I love reading, so I'll look it up.
Yes, and you just mentioned this interaction with spirits. And we are talking in this podcast about things that are beyond this just physical world, which means that you are interacting with the world that is beyond just physical, this world of spirits. Can you talk a little bit more about that world? What is it about? How big it is? How diverse it is? Who are those spirits? What kind of spirits? To give just a glimpse for people who are listening to us, what is that is beyond the reality that we see with the naked eye?
I would love to. So, listeners, I am an exorcist, which means that I deal in spiritual mediation. I don't like to say spiritual warfare because a witch doctor exorcist, our purpose is for peaceful extraction, not for warfare. And that also means that I interact with many different kinds of spirits. So in our world, spirits can sometimes end up here that aren't supposed to be here. They're supposed to be on the other side. Or we have spirits that interact with us all the time or hide from us. If we look at folklore, you'll notice spirits and how they're named in their descriptions. And those are the kinds of things that I interact with. So someone who is numb to interacting with spirits and the supernatural, they'll be brushing their teeth and not know that there is an 6-legged, furless, monkey-like creature sitting in the corner of the bathroom that has made a home there and is sleeping. Now, I may haunt and scare some of your viewers, but don't worry, most spirits don't want anything to do with humans. Humans are destructive and terrible. Spirits don't want anything to do with us. So, as much as we think spirits are out to get us, and because we're so special, spirits usually don't want anything to do with us. They may try to scare you away if you're walking through a forest, but in a forest, you may have something that has a bird-like head and a furry body and wings with a spiked tail. And that cryptid may be the snallygaster from Maryland. We have different spirits all over our world. And as a medium, I also interact with spirits in our spirit world. That also means the human dead, and to help them cross over or to relay messages when I'm hired to do so. Or I am also an oracle, where certain deities may bless me with the gift of information, where they will interact with me on as that in between, and to relay messages for clients or for students, or to give me guidance when I'm healing someone or working with someone to help point me in a healthier direction. The spiritual world is much bigger than I understand, and I think that any human can understand. Because I've been doing this so long, I believe that all of the religions are correct. I have experienced things from different cultures that are not from where I was raised. And therefore, I believe that all of the religions are correct and that they all are true. That all of the gods are there, that all of the spirits from all the folklores exist, and that humans, in our narrow-minded, egocentric ways, screw it up and use only the small pieces of the puzzle that they have and try to say, this is right and this is only right. They only have a piece of a puzzle. The puzzle, if we back up and we get out of our own ways, the puzzle is so big, the picture is so big that it's hard to fathom. I don't know how big our spirit world is, but I do know it is much bigger than we can comprehend.
You mentioned different cultures and different folklore, and that all of those spirits from different folklore, they in fact exist. And my question is, do you feel that they're also attached to certain physical realm or physical place as we go from one place to another? Let's say if we are in Germany or if we are in Italy, we would encounter different type of spirits that are reflected in the folklore of that place.
Sure. I don't know because I haven't visited all of those places. So it would just be theory.
Mhm.
But what I do know is that I think, like, let's say the Japanese, they have an incredible lexicon of spirits. If they were just really good at writing it down and documenting it, we can use that lexicon and translate it to spirits that look the same that are in a different country.
Mhm.
I think that's helpful. And then sometimes I think they are regional. And then I wonder, how did you get here? How did you get misplaced?
Mhm.
Why are you here? And my job as a witch doctor is to get them back. And we do that through spirit walking. Let's get you home where you're supposed to be. And that's probably why you're upset.
Mhm.
In my book, Witchdoctor, Exorcist,
Mhm.
I talk about different kinds of spirits around the world, and some of which I have had to exorcise or remove from a human, and some of which have had to mediate on behalf or help the spirit. The book goes through not only techniques on how to become an exorcist, but it goes through a kind of memoir of different situations and different spirit interactions I have had as an exorcist, including my mistakes, because I don't want any of my students or any of my readers to make the same mistakes I made. So let's be honest and say, I messed up here, and here are the tools you need to not make that same mistake that I made. I have interacted with a Stritska. I have interacted with a Kappa from Japan. I have interacted with a Pukwudgie, Menehune, spirits from vastly different cultures. And I use the name that best describe its appearance and its behavior from the culture that did the best job writing it down.
What was your most memorable experience interacting with the spirit?
There are two of my favorite interactions, both of which are in my book, Witchdoctor, Exorcist. The one is there's a spirit, and I still don't know what he was. From a description, you may even say he looked like what aliens look like. I don't know what kind of spirit he was, but I was back home living on Maui, and a spirit showed up and was lost and needed help getting home. And the kind of clairvoyant I am, he could show me how he ended up where he was. And I could try to explain how to get home. I was much younger and I didn't know how to help the spirit directly by moving him, only trying to explain to him how to get home. As I got older, another favorite story of mine was crossing a little boy who was haunting a young woman. The little boy was killed in the area hundreds of years before, and the house was built around him. The woman in the home looked like his sister when he was alive. And so he was, of course, misplaced and confused and haunting her, but it was actually a situation of love and care. And he just needed to cross over so that he could be with his family on the other side in the spirit world, in the afterlife. And we can call it whatever you want, whatever name. But those two, Crossing Timothy and the story of Boots, are two of my favorite interactions, and they remind me why I do what I do.
Yes.
I get to help.
And this is one of my main questions that I ask people on our podcast. What do you think is your function in this world, in between the spiritual world and our physical world? What do you do as a magical professional?
My job is to teach. My job in this world as a witch doctor is to teach and to make more magical people, to help guide and facilitate and say, you're not crazy, and you are probably as special as you believe you are. And let's find some humility and some safety and learn the skills you need to interact. And hopefully, more and more of my students will be professionals, and they will be others that you interview on your podcast. I hope to just make more people that you say, what is your job? And they're like, I learned at Bearbridge Academy, or I learned from Aly. My job is to teach and create more professionals.
More magical professionals. Yes.
Make some more.
Very good. What also I noticed that there is no set of skills that you just came with. So you are also developing your skills over time. Like in the story with that spirit that you've met that needed to get where it wanted. And at that time, you didn't know how to do this. You were just trying to explain to the spirit. So how do you acquire those skills? Because later on, you already learned how to actually push the spirit or bring it where it needs to be. How does this happen? Where do you find information? How do you learn? You are teaching others, but who teaches you? How do you find the ways to teach yourself?
So I was taught by wonderful professionals, and from getting those foundations, Then when I read books, I can also find, oh, this isn't true, this is true. It's kind of like I was taught 3 different languages, and based on those languages, I can kind of speak other languages or learn those languages. So having those foundations in what I was taught can then jumpstart when I pick something up, and I can say, oh, that's true, that's not true, that's true, that's not true, and kind of weed out the either culturally appropriated practices that are not authentic, or I can find those wonderful nuggets that are usable.
Mm-hmm.
There are some phenomenal authors out there whom I greatly respect. I also love to read historical documents. I want to go back as far as I can in reading and not read the modern versions of things. And from those historical documents, being able to bring them into modern usage.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, it helped to have grandma. That helped.
Yes. You had the teacher from the very beginning, which
Yes.
of course was very important. And you mentioned those authors that you really respect. Maybe you can share some of the authors' names with our listeners. What would you recommend?
Yes. One of my favorite authors is Sandra Ingerman. She's brilliant. She is a shamanic practitioner, a shamanic trainer. Her books are phenomenal. I also do like Hank Wesselman, although some of his writings,
Mm-hmm.
I think that some of his writings are influenced by the time
Mm-hmm.
and have a monotheistic viewpoint on some of it, but he's still a brilliant, brilliant writer. I do also like Richard Cavendish's book on black magic. It's highly edited and researched. And I also love Star.Ships and Gordon White. Phenomenal book, great author. Really love Gordon White. I would say Sandra Ingerman's books are the most accessible. Her language is very easy, and anyone who's interested in shamanic work, that's the author they should turn to. The other books I mentioned are a little denser, but still wonderful.
I think that's a great start for our listeners, or maybe even not a start, maybe deepening into the subject for some of our listeners. Next question is, those spirits, how do they find you? How do they feel that you are the one who can help? How do spirits choose people who can help them in general?
I think that if we're in a restaurant and someone is looking at you, eventually you're going to turn and notice them, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think with spirits it's the same. So they know that I can see them. So they come to interact with me. I don't think that I have some divine purpose to help spirits. I'm a teacher,
Mm-hmm.
but spirits bump into me and they go, oh, I need help. And then I will help the spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, I also believe that just because you have a spiritual experience doesn't mean it's divine in nature. I think that humans believe we're more important than we are. That sometimes it's just happenstance. Like you bump into a ghost, it doesn't mean that there is some divine purpose that the ghost needs you yourself to pass on this message to their loved one. Sometimes they're just bothersome. I have hours that I work, and my bedroom is off limits from spirits. They're not allowed to interact with me. I have all these wards and things up. No, I have hours. You will leave me alone. And like I said, there's also troublesome spirits where they pretend like they have some divine notion for you. And humans are so self-absorbed that we believe it because we want to be novel. We want to be special. So a troublesome spirit will capitalize on that vulnerability and just show up to cause problems. Just like Facebook, there are trolls everywhere, even spiritual ones.
Yep. And it's also important to set boundaries like you do. Yes.
Set boundaries.
My office is off limits. Yeah. I have work hours. That's it. Yeah. I'm always curious why certain spirits get trapped in this world. So that then we need to help them somehow to cross over. What can be the reason for that?
I don't know. I have found that most humans, when they die, take between 1 day and about 28 days, about a moon cycle, to cross over. Usually, most human dead cross over pretty quickly, but some linger, and I'm not sure why they linger. Again, I don't pretend to have the answers to things that I don't actually know. I think it may vary from spirit to spirit, and it may be very complicated and maybe just situational. When spirits are here longer than that month, I have found that they have a harder time crossing on their own, and then they need help crossing. So you have someone who is a medium who knows how to open and close the veil, or someone who's a spiritualist and can conjure a psychopomp or a spirit that does the work for you. Their job is to help usher a spirit across. I don't know why. I have no idea.
Thank you, Ali. And I would like us to focus a little bit on that Italian magic. It really mesmerized me when I saw it because I've never heard about this before. And my first question is, Italian magic, does it really exist? Because after all the Inquisition things that were going in Spain and of course in Italy, I thought that there is no magic left as a discipline in those areas. So can you tell a little bit more about that magic? Where is it stemming from? Where is it coming from? Where was it left? And how did it happen that it's still alive?
Sure. A few things. When I was taught the craft from my grandmother, we did not use the word witch. We were not allowed to use that word. We also didn't use strigon or strega. We didn't use any of those terms. We also didn't use spell, and we used the word craft. We were doing some crafts, or it's prayers or rituals. And that it's folklore. That's all. And by naming it those things and keeping it secret, that is how things stayed alive, is being passed down from usually every other generation, usually not straight down, but every other generation. That way it's also harder to catch. So my grandmother didn't teach her children. She waited for a grandchild that was gifted. My older sister probably would have been taught, but she didn't have access to that grandmother. So it skipped her, and then I came along, and my grandmother went, "Oh, that one has a sight, so I'm going to teach this one." And it's a boy. How? Because it's usually women. Women are usually much more talented in these areas than boys. So she started teaching me. The way it survived was then that way, is through family lines, and you would use code words. You would not actually say what anything is. And even spell ingredients, a lot of them are in code. You don't actually lay out what spells are. That way it's just folklore. It's just poetry. They're just stories.
Mm-hmm.
And by doing that, you take away the scary part or the hunted part. It has to go hidden. Also, in Italian craft, it's important socially to make friends.
Mm-hmm.
And that aspect of witchcraft is forgotten because everybody just wants to do a spell. But in order to survive, you have to be friendly. If you aren't friendly and charismatic and can make friends, then someone could be your enemy and you could be hunted.
Mm-hmm.
If you make friends and everybody loves you, then they're just going to say, oh, he's eccentric, instead of, that's a witch. It's a really important aspect to survival is charisma and being able to make friends. People nowadays don't find value in that skill, in being friendly, in charisma. And that was essential to my upbringing to make sure that no matter what, I was going to survive as a witch, as a person, by having charismatic skills. Then, when I practice, people think, oh, he's friendly, he's cute, he's nice to get along with. Yeah, okay, he's a witch, but he's not going to hurt me.
Yeah.
And I have a friend who happens to be a witch. Man, I'm winning.
Yes. Yeah, this makes total sense. And definitely I can feel it from you, this friendliness and warm feeling. And I understand people who communicate with you. What are the unique qualities of Italian craft? We'll not use other words, Italian craft compared with other crafts from other cultures.
Well, depending on region, they all share a strong sense of spirits out and about. So there's that aspect of interacting with spirits.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to ingredients, they're very green oriented. So there's going to be a lot of herbs, and we're going to hide it in the kitchen. So it's a lot of kitchen witchery because no one's going to, you're not allowed in the kitchen anyway. Get out of the kitchen, I'm cooking. And I can also do spells, and you don't know I'm doing spells because you're not allowed in the kitchen. So there's those aspects. There's a lot of kitchen witchery and folklore. There's also really easy spells, like finding out whom you're going to marry. You would take a stone and throw it into a well at midnight, and the sound you hear is the name of the person that you're supposed to marry. Throwing a rock in a well, that's innocuous, right? No one's going to know anything. It's totally safe. You're just a menace throwing rocks at wells. Like, you're not actually doing any witchcraft.
Mm-hmm.
The Italians also can communicate with certain kinds of animals, like slugs or spiders, in order to get information or to have those creatures deliver spells. And again, spiders are everywhere. So you don't know that it's being done. It's really hidden. So there's that aspect, is how well hidden it is. Whereas if you go to, let's look at hoodoo, because I also teach hoodoo. Hoodoo is going to follow a structure and how many ingredients of what. There's going to be more powders, more things ground up. They're also going to use washes or things that are liquid, whereas that's not common in Italy. You're not going to grind up things and use a powder in Italy, and you're not going to do like baths or washes. You're going to be more active in your spell work versus sympathetic or mirroring spells like you would in hoodoo. So that's a few differences. Mm-hmm. Italian witchcraft also has one rule: don't hit first. Just don't hit first. Whereas hoodoo is about peace and prosperity. So every tradition that is, let's use the word magical, has a different ethics or why you would enact a spell. Italians also really worry about the evil eye. That is what you would say is a spell cast on you. And nowadays, people would say they are attacked by a psychic vampire, or there's a psychic attack. Someone is jealous of me, or there's a hex on me. In Italian, there's a bunch of different kinds of il malacchio, but it's all that. is you would find out, are you hexed and how do we stop it? Or how do you hex somebody else for cutting you off in traffic, for instance?
Yes. And where are the origins of this Italian craft and among them Etruscan? Is that a separate part or if not, how is it connected with the Italian craft?
Great. The Etruscan witchcraft is going to be northern Italy, and it's what modern Strigaria is based on. If you're going south down to Sicily, you're going to have Benedicaria, where it is more folkloric and the kinds of spells are going to be influenced by Northern Africa. You'll have a lot of influence throughout the craft from Germany and not throughout Italy, but in northern Italy, you'll have some Germanic influences. In southern Italy, you'll have a lot of African influences. And then, of course, that blends based on families marrying each other and over centuries, what happens, and also what ingredients you happen to have in the area that does work because you don't have access to, let's say, a cowrie shell. So what do you use instead? So based on the regions of Italy, you're going to have different kinds of spell work, how they're influenced by other cultures as well. Now, like I said, they all share that are you hexed or are you not? They share that in common, and they also share the interaction with spirits. The name of spirits change from region to region, but they're still talking about the same thing. They just have a different name. And when I say spirits, I also mean deities. So some deities, for instance, have numerous names in order to blend or hide.
I heard about this information that Dionysus, he was going through Etruscan places, and of course around him there were many women who were doing craft, learning from him, and it had that influence on the magic of the area and the development of the craft. How do you think this is currently reflected in the craft? Is this tradition still out there?
I imagine it is. Again, it's going to be family based. So every family may have a different patron or a different spirit that they work with. So I imagine that the answer is yes, there are Dionysus based families or traditions. There are also Diana based traditions, and there are also Tinia or Faunus based traditions. I can't firmly say that when it comes to Italian witchcraft, it is as clean and easy to put in a box as other traditions because it is family oriented. In fact, I recently had a viewer on one of my social media get really upset because he said he's from Sicily and he said that the religions that I mentioned are Americanized, of which I agree. Some of them are, and some of them are not. They're written by an American who interviewed an Italian. And the Italian told her version from her family. Again, Italians are secretive. So what happens within one family can be very different than what happens in another family. That's how it survived. If it were public and everybody did the same thing, then everyone would know and everyone would be killed.
Yeah.
So from home to home, the traditions are going to be slightly different and based on what is passed down or married into.
Yeah, that's amazing. So many different traditions because there are families, and all this is still kept alive, which is, I think, is very important. We soon have nature celebration, which is Ostara, and it is perceived that during those main 8 points of the year, the border between the spirit world and the human world becomes a little thinner. Maybe you have some suggestions for people who want to be a little bit more open and understand a little bit the spiritual world, some recommendation of how to get that sense of what else is in this world, that we're not as limited by only physical presence, but also have something beyond that.
Okay, my advice is for our human listeners to remember that you don't own spirits and you're not entitled to spirits. That just because you put on an offering doesn't mean they have to answer the phone. We don't answer the phone to every spam caller. And what if you were spam? The next piece of advice is to proceed with caution and to name your biases. That we make an awful lot of assumptions about what a spirit is or what its motivation is without actually finding out. And that's both positive and negative. Just because something looks like an angel doesn't mean it is. And just because something is ugly and gnarled doesn't mean it's evil. It's just ugly. It doesn't mean it's out to eat your soul. It's just unfortunate looking. So move with caution and have humility. I think the best way to interact with spirit is a quote that was from Sesame Street. And that is, put down the rubber ducky if you want to play the saxophone. I think everyone needs to put their cell phone down, leave it inside, and just listen to the wind. You'll connect to spirit.
Thank you so much, Aly. That was absolutely wonderful advice. I appreciate it, and I'm sure our listeners will appreciate it very much. Can you maybe, as a summary, tell our listeners where they can connect with you, find your school, find information about you, all those main things that they would be able to do that?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. The school is Bear Bridge Academy, and you can find it at bearbridgeacademy.com. And it's bear as in the animal, not bear as in naked. And if you want to find me or hire me for services, it's just my name.com, alycardinalli.com. And of course, my book, Witchdoctor Exorcist, is out, which is a lesson plan and techniques on how to be an exorcist through indigenous spiritual practices, as well as a memoir.
Thank you. And we covered so much today, I think. At least for the first time, I think that's amazing amount of information that we have. But maybe there was something that I didn't ask, but you still wanted to share or tell our listeners. So that would be the best time to do it.
Oh, I think we've covered so much. I really, really loved your questions and our interaction. And I think I've talked your ear off enough. I think I've said everything I could say.
Thank you so much, Aly. Of course, I wish you all the best, you, your academy, your students, and I admire your passion for education. I truly do. And my best wishes. And I hope that we will still be able to connect in the future, hopefully again on our podcast. And actually, I'm very much looking into the curriculum on your site, and maybe I will decide and take a course or something like that.
Austin, I would love to see you on my roster.
Thank you so much, Aly. Thank you. Bye. Dear listeners, I hope you found our Magical Professions podcast episode insightful. As we concluded, I'd like to extend a heartfelt invitation to all of you. Your stories, encounters, and knowledge are invaluable to us, and we want you to be a part of this mystical journey. Have you ever had a brush with a magical profession, a strange encounter, or stumbled upon hidden knowledge? Do you possess ancient scrolls, widespread tales, or first hand experiences that you believe belong in the spotlight? Are you aware of a sci fi or fantasy book or a movie with magical professionals in it? We want to hear from you. At Magical Professions, we cherish the power of collective wisdom and the magic of shared experiences. So don't be shy. Reach out to us with your stories, sources, or any information about magical professions you would like to share. You can connect with us via email at magicalprofessions@gmail.com or through our social media channels. Your contribution could become the heart of a future episode, and together we'll weave an even richer tapestry of wonder. Thank you for joining us on this mystical journey. Remember, the magic is not just in the stories we tell, but in the connections we make. Until next time, keep the magic alive, and may your world be ever more enchanting. I can't wait to hear from you.